Let me tell you something most people never learn. Silence is not weakness. Silence is not losing. Silence is not you giving up. Silence is power when it's chosen. See, when a woman keeps talking, explaining, chasing, asking for closure, begging for clarity, she thinks she's fighting for love. But what she's really doing is teaching a man that he can leave, come back, disappear, return, and she'll still be standing right there explaining her worth. And men don't miss what's always available. They miss what disappears with dignity. That's where the no contact method comes in. Not as a trick, not as a game, but as a reset of your value. This is not about punishing him. This is about protecting you. Because the goal isn't to make him text. The goal is to make him feel the loss. Now let me walk you through how that really happens. Understand why he doesn't miss you yet. Let me tell you something that's hard to hear, but it will set you free once you really understand it. The reason he doesn't miss you yet has nothing to do with your value, your beauty. It has everything to do with access, emotionally, mentally, energetically. You're still available to him, even if you think you're not. And as long as a man feels access, he does not feel loss. You may not be calling him anymore. You may not be seeing him in person. But if you're still checking his social media, still replaying conversations in your head, still wondering what he's doing, still hoping he'll reach out, your energy hasn't left him. And men can feel that. Not in words, not in logic, but in comfort. He's comfortable knowing that if he wanted to come back, explain himself halfway, or send a late night message, you'd probably respond. Comfort kills urgency, and urgency is what creates missing. Right now in his mind, the door isn't closed. It's just quiet. And when a man believes the door is still unlocked, he doesn't rush to knock. He takes his time. He assumes you're still there emotionally, still holding space, still waiting for clarity. That assumption is dangerous because it delays the reality of loss. He doesn't miss you yet because he hasn't had to face the full weight of life without you. Here's another truth most women don't realize. Men don't process separation the same way women do. Women feel the loss immediately. The silence hits fast. The emotions rush in all at once. But men often feel relief first. Relief from responsibility. Relief from emotional conversations. Relief from having to show up consistently. And if you interrupt that phase by reaching out, checking in, or just wanting closure, you extend the relief stage. You delay the discomfort that leads to missing you. When you keep explaining your feelings, you think you're being honest. But what you're really doing is feeding his ego. You're showing him that you care more about being understood than being respected. And a man who feels emotionally fed, even through absence, he feels importance. He feels relevant. And relevance replaces regret. Another reason he doesn't miss you yet is because you trained him not to. This is not blame, it's awareness. If throughout the relationship you were the one who fixed things, reached out first, forgave quickly, and fought for connection, his mind associates distance with safety, not loss. He learned that whenever things got uncomfortable, you would bridge the gap. So now even in separation, he subconsciously expects you to do what you've always done. Return emotionally before he ever has to. And let's talk about social media, because this is where most women break no contact without realizing it. When you post indirectly for him, when your captions hint at pain, strength, or growth meant to be noticed, you're still communicating. You're still telling him, I'm here. I'm thinking about you. I want you to see me. And once again, that gives him reassurance. He may not engage, but he observes, and observation without effort keeps him comfortable. Men miss what disappears without explanation. When there's no emotional leakage, no indirect signals, no late night texts, no mutual friend updates, that's when the mind starts to feel unsettled. Silence creates space, and space creates questions. Questions create reflection. Reflection is where regret is born. But as long as you're emotionally present somewhere in his world, that process hasn't started yet. Right now, he believes you're just taking a break, cooling off, or waiting for him to figure things out. He hasn't connected your absence to finality. And people don't miss what they believe they can access later. They miss what feels truly gone. Loss doesn't come from distance alone. It comes from certainty. And this is the most important part to understand. The reason he doesn't miss you yet is because you haven't fully chosen yourself yet. The moment you stop waiting for him to realize your worth, the moment you stop hoping silence will make him change, something shifts. Your energy withdraws for real, not as a tactic, not as a test, but as a decision. And when a man feels that decision energetically, it unsettles him. Missing doesn't start when you leave. It starts when he realizes you're not coming back the same way. No contact is not a tool. It's a transformation. Most people approach no contact like it's a strategy, a move on a chessboard, something you do to get a reaction. They think if they disappear long enough, if they stay silent just right, the other person will suddenly wake up, panic, and come running back. But when you treat no contact like a trick, it collapses the moment your emotions rise. Real no contact doesn't start with discipline. It starts with identity. It's not about what you do with your phone. It's about what you decide about yourself. The truth is, if you're using no contact to control the outcome, you're still emotionally attached to the outcome. And attachment keeps you energetically present. You may not be speaking, but you're waiting. You're counting days. You're checking signs. You're hoping silence will perform magic on his mind. That's not absence. That's delayed communication. And men can feel that waiting energy. It doesn't disturb them. It reassures them. No contact becomes powerful only when it stops being about him entirely. When silence is no longer something you're forcing, but something that feels natural because you've emotionally stepped out of the dynamic. That's why no contact is a transformation. It changes how you see yourself, how you regulate your emotions, and how you relate to people who don't show up for you. At first, no contact feels unnatural. Your nervous system is used to connection, even unhealthy connection. You're used to resolving tension by talking, explaining, or seeking reassurance. So when you stop, your body panics. You feel restless. You reach for your phone. You replay conversations in your head. This discomfort is not weakness, it's detox. You're withdrawing from emotional dependency. And just like any withdrawal, it feels uncomfortable before it feels freeing. As days pass, something subtle but powerful begins to happen. You start hearing your own thoughts again. You realize how much of your mental energy was spent managing his moods, interpreting his silence, or hoping he'd show up differently. Without constant emotional output, your mind clears. You begin responding to life instead of reacting to him. That's transformation. You're no longer orbiting someone who chose distance. You're returning to yourself. This shift changes your energy in ways you don't even announce. You stop needing validation. You stop craving explanations. You stop wanting to be chosen by someone who already made their choice. And this inner shift is what creates real absence. Not because you disappeared, but because the version of you that was emotionally available no longer exists. No contact also forces you to confront truths you avoided. You see where you overgave. You see where you ignored red flags because you believed love required patience at any cost. You see how often you silenced your needs to keep peace. This clarity can be painful, but it's also empowering. Because once you see yourself clearly, you stop negotiating your worth. And here's something important: transformation doesn't make you cold. It makes you grounded. You don't hate him. You don't seek revenge. You simply stop centering him. And that neutrality is powerful. Men expect anger or longing. They know how to respond to emotion. What they don't know how to handle is emotional independence. When no contact is real, you don't feel the urge to announce your growth. You don't need to prove strength. You're not performing healing, you're living it. Your silence isn't loud, it's settled. And settled energy is unsettling to someone who relied on your emotional availability. Another thing transformation does is restore your standards. You stop romanticizing inconsistency. You stop chasing potential. You begin valuing effort, clarity, and consistency because you now know the cost of accepting less. This doesn't just affect how you see him. It affects how you see everyone who enters your life next. And whether he reaches out or not becomes secondary, because the real shift has already happened inside you. You're no longer asking, will he miss me? You're asking, does he deserve access to me now? That question alone tells you how far you've come. No contact is not about disappearing to be found. It's about returning to yourself so completely that being found becomes optional. His mind starts rewriting the story when you finally go silent the right way. No emotional leakage, no indirect messages, no sudden reappearances. Something very specific begins to happen in his mind, and it doesn't happen immediately. At first, he feels fine, even relieved. He tells himself the story that supports his decision. He focuses on what annoyed him, what felt heavy, what he didn't want to deal with anymore. That's how the mind protects the ego. If he left, then leaving had to make sense. So in the beginning, he rewrites the story in his favor. But silence has a way of removing distractions. Without your presence, without your reactions, without your emotional availability, his mind has nothing to push against. And when there's nothing to push against, the story starts to change. Because the human brain hates unfinished narratives. It wants resolution. It wants to make sense of absence. And that's when memory begins to work differently. The arguments that once felt big start to shrink. The moments he used to justify distance begin to lose emotional weight. What stays are the moments that carried feeling. Your laughter, your loyalty, the way you showed up consistently, the way you cared when no one else did. Absence doesn't erase memory, it sharpens it. And when there's no new version of you to react to, his mind fills the gap with the version of you that felt safest. What's important to understand is that regret doesn't come from missing conversations. It comes from missing impact. He starts realizing how much emotional labor you carried without announcing it, how much stability you brought just by being present. And because you're not there anymore, he feels the difference in his everyday life. The quiet moments hit harder. The lack of emotional grounding becomes noticeable. That's when the story starts rewriting itself. At this stage, his ego gets uncomfortable because now the question shifts from why did I leave to did I underestimate what I had? And that question creates internal conflict. He doesn't want to believe he made a mistake, but the silence forces reflection. There's no reassurance coming from you, no explanation, no emotional confirmation that he was right. So he's left alone with his thoughts. And here's the part most people don't talk about. Men often don't realize the value of emotional safety until it's gone. While you were there, your consistency blended into the background. It became normal, predictable, expected. But once it's removed, the contrast becomes sharp. Other interactions feel shallow. Other connections feel incomplete. Not because you were perfect, but because you were present. As time passes, the narrative shifts again. He starts remembering not just who you were, but who he was when he was with you, how he felt seen, how he felt supported, how life felt more stable. And this is dangerous territory for his pride, because now the loss isn't just about you. It's about the version of himself that existed around you. Silence also removes your flaws from the present moment. There's no new mistake to focus on, no fresh disappointment, no current behavior to criticize. So the mind reaches backward, not forward, and memory over time becomes selective. It keeps what felt good and softens what felt hard. That's why absence often makes someone seem more valuable than presence ever did. He may try to distract himself, fill the space, stay busy, seek attention elsewhere. But distraction only works for so long. The quieter the nights become, the louder the questions grow. And because you didn't fight, didn't beg, didn't chase, he has no evidence that you needed him more than he needed you. That imbalance unsettles him. This is when curiosity starts to creep in. He wonders how you're doing, whether you've moved on, whether you're happier without him. And curiosity is the doorway to regret, Because once he imagines a world where you no longer belong to him in any way, the weight of that loss becomes real. The most powerful part of this process is that you didn't force it. You didn't explain your value. You didn't convince him. You simply removed access. And when access disappears, the mind does what it always does. It tries to understand why. His story about you changes because you changed the ending. You didn't stay to be misunderstood. You didn't argue your worth. You walked away quietly. And that quiet ending echoes louder in his mind than any final speech ever could. Your glow up is quiet, not performative. The most powerful glow up you will ever experience is the one nobody sees coming. Not the one announced on social media, not the one wrapped in captions about strength or revenge, and definitely not the one designed to make him look back. A real glow up doesn't seek witnesses. It happens quietly, internally, and without explanation. And that's exactly why it shakes him when he eventually senses it. When you first step into no contact, there's often an urge to prove something, to show that you're thriving, healed, unbothered. That urge comes from pain, not power. Because when growth is performative, it's still tied to his validation. You're still letting his perception shape your behavior. Quiet growth cuts that cord. It removes the audience entirely. And when there's no audience, the transformation becomes real. A quiet glow up starts with your nervous system calming down. You begin to sleep better. You stop waking up with anxiety in your chest. Your appetite returns. You notice moments of peace where your mind isn't racing toward his name. These changes seem small, but they are profound. They mean you're no longer living in emotional survival mode. You're not bracing for abandonment anymore. You're present in your own life again. Your energy shifts before your appearance ever does. You stop scanning rooms for him. You stop wondering if he knows what you're doing. You stop posting with intention. And that detachment creates a grounded presence. You move differently. You speak slower. You listen more. You're no longer trying to be chosen. You're choosing yourself in real time. And that self-selection is magnetic, whether anyone notices or not. What makes this glow up powerful is that it's rooted in self-respect, not resentment. You're not improving out of spite. You're improving because you finally see how much of yourself you abandoned trying to keep someone else. You start honoring your boundaries without announcing them. You say no without guilt. You stop over-explaining. You realize that peace is not boring. It's expensive. And here's the part most people don't understand when you grow quietly. People project their own meanings onto you. Because you're not telling your story anymore, others start filling in the blanks, especially him. He senses the absence of your emotional availability. He notices you're no longer reactive. You're no longer reachable in the same way. And because he doesn't have access to your inner world, his imagination does the work. A performative glow up invites commentary. A quiet glow up invites curiosity. And curiosity lingers. You begin doing things that nourish you, not things that look impressive. You choose routines that stabilize you. You invest in your health, your work, your mind. Not to become someone new, but to return to who you were before you learned to shrink. And the more you settle into yourself, the less you feel the need to prove anything. This kind of growth also changes how you love. You no longer attach quickly. You observe. You assess. You value consistency over intensity. You stop mistaking attention for effort. And because of that, your standards rise naturally, not from arrogance, but from clarity. If he crosses your path during this phase, he feels the difference immediately. Not because you look different, but because you feel different. There's no tension in your voice. No urgency in your presence. You're kind without being accessible, warm without being open, and that balance unsettles someone who once had full emotional access to you. The quiet glow up also rewires how you handle loss. You stop needing closure from people who couldn't give you commitment. You stop chasing explanations from people who already showed you their limits. You accept reality faster, and acceptance is the highest form of emotional maturity. What makes this glow up unforgettable is that it didn't require him to change. You change without waiting. You didn't announce your healing. You didn't document your progress. You simply lived it. And that's the kind of transformation that can't be undone or ignored. When growth is quiet, it's permanent. When it's performative, it fades. And the woman who grows in silence becomes powerful in ways that don't need applause. When he reaches out, your response decides everything. When he finally reaches out, it rarely happens the way you imagined during those quiet nights. It's usually not an apology, not clarity, not a confession of regret. Most of the time, it's something small, almost casual, like nothing ever really ended. A simple, hey, a random question, or a message that sounds friendly but empty. And that moment right there is where everything you've worked for can either be protected or undone. Because his message isn't about love. It's about testing access. He's checking to see if the door he walked away from is still open the way he left it. He wants to know if your energy is still available, if your emotions are still within reach, if he can step back into your world without addressing why he left in the first place. And the way you respond tells him everything he needs to know. If you respond immediately with warmth, explanation, or emotion, the dynamic resets, not because you did something wrong, but because you communicated familiarity. You showed him that time without you didn't change your availability. And when a man feels that nothing has changed, he feels no urgency to change himself. Comfort returns, curiosity disappears. But when you respond from a grounded place, something different happens. You're polite, calm, and composed, but not eager. You're not cold. You're not dramatic. You're simply no longer centered on him. And that subtle shift unsettles him more than anger ever could, because now he doesn't know where he stands. What matters most in this moment is not your words. It's your energy. You're no longer reaching for connection. You're assessing it. You're not trying to fix the past. You're observing the present. And men feel that difference instantly. It creates a pause in their mind, a moment of uncertainty. And uncertainty is where respect begins to grow. This is also the moment when old emotional habits try to resurface. The urge to explain how much he hurt you. The desire to finally be understood. The hope that if you say the right thing, he'll choose you fully this time. But that urge comes from the version of you that no contact already healed. You don't need to reopen wounds to prove depth. You don't need to rehash pain to validate your experience. Your silence already did that work. When he reaches out without accountability, he's hoping to slide back into emotional access without responsibility. Your calm restraint blocks that path, and not by force, by clarity. You're no longer available for half-effort conversations. You're no longer entertaining emotional ambiguity. And you don't need to announce those boundaries. Your behavior communicates them. Another important shift happens here. You stop measuring his interest by what he says and start measuring it by what he does. If his messages stay vague, inconsistent, or surface level, you don't invest, you don't chase clarity. You let his effort speak. And that self-control changes the power dynamic completely. For the first time, he's the one unsure. He's the one wondering how much access he has. He's the one questioning whether you've moved on. And because you're not emotionally over-explaining, his mind fills in the gaps. He starts to feel the distance he once created. He starts realizing that re-entering your life now requires intention. And here's the most important part. You're no longer responding to get something. You're responding to see something, to see if he's capable of showing up differently, to see if he's willing to meet you where you are now, not where you used to be. That mindset alone signals growth. If he rises to the moment, shows consistency, clarity, and effort, you have the clarity to decide from strength, not longing. And if he doesn't, you don't feel crushed, because your sense of self no longer depends on his response. You're not losing him again. You already learned how to live without him. When he reaches out, the power isn't in the message. It's in the woman reading it. And the woman you've become doesn't rush, doesn't beg, and doesn't abandon herself to be chosen. The real win is not him. It's you. At some point in this journey, something quietly shifts inside you. You stop checking your phone with hope or anxiety. You stop imagining conversations that may never happen. You stop measuring your worth by whether he comes back or stays gone. And that's when you realize the truth that changes everything. The real win was never about him choosing you again. The real win is that you chose yourself. In the beginning, it felt like silence was something you were enduring, like holding your ground was costing you something. But over time, you start to see that what you lost wasn't love. It was confusion. It was emotional exhaustion. It was the constant effort of trying to be enough for someone who wasn't meeting you where you stood. And without that weight, your life feels lighter, more honest. You begin to trust your intuition again. Not the anxious voice that questioned everything, but the grounded one that notices patterns and honors red flags. You stop romanticizing inconsistency. You stop excusing emotional unavailability as fear or stress. You understand now that love doesn't require you to shrink, wait, or compete for basic respect. And that understanding stays with you long after this chapter ends. What's powerful about this transformation is that it doesn't depend on external validation. You're no longer asking, am I enough? You're asking, is this aligned with who I am now? That question alone elevates your standards. It changes who you allow into your life, how long you tolerate uncertainty, and how quickly you walk away from what doesn't feel right. You also start to see yourself with compassion, not as someone who failed, but as someone who loved deeply and learned wisely. You forgive yourself for staying too long, for hoping too hard, for giving more than you received. That forgiveness is not weakness, it's maturity. It frees you from shame and allows you to move forward without bitterness. The real win is that you no longer fear being alone. Solitude becomes a place of restoration instead of loneliness. You enjoy your own company. You fill your time with things that nourish you. And because you're no longer afraid of losing someone, you become selective. You stop chasing connection and start allowing alignment. This shift also changes how others perceive you. You carry yourself differently, not guarded, but grounded, not distant, but discerning. You speak with clarity. You listen without urgency. And that presence draws healthier dynamics naturally. You don't have to announce boundaries. You live them. If he ever looks back, what he sees is not the woman he left. He sees someone who didn't collapse without him. Someone who grew quietly. Someone who learned the value of emotional independence. And whether that realization brings him regret or admiration doesn't matter anymore. Because his opinion is no longer the measure of your success. The most important part of this win is that it's permanent. Relationships may come and go, but the self-respect you've built doesn't disappear. The clarity you've gained doesn't fade. The strength you've developed becomes part of who you are. You carry it into every future connection, every decision, every boundary. You no longer need to prove your worth to be chosen. You understand now that being chosen starts with choosing yourself. And from that place, you never lose. Because even if love ends, you don't abandon yourself again. The real win is not reconciliation. It's self-respect. The real win is not his regret. It's your growth. And once you understand that, no one ever truly takes you for granted again because you no longer allow it. As we bring this message to a close, let me leave you with something that stays with you long after the silence does. What you've just learned is not a method to control another human being. It's a reminder of who you are when you stop abandoning yourself for the sake of being chosen. The no contact journey isn't about punishment, revenge, or proving a point. It's about returning to your center when life knocked you off balance. There was a time when you believed love meant effort at any cost. That if you just tried harder, explained better, waited longer, someone would finally see your value. But real love never asks you to disappear to keep it alive. Real love doesn't thrive on confusion, inconsistency, or emotional exhaustion. And now you know that if he comes back, it will be because he recognizes what he lost, not because you chased him into clarity. And if he doesn't, it won't be because you weren't enough. It will be because your growth took you somewhere he could not follow. Either way,